Good morning, everyone. My name is Gary Huntley, and it's my pleasure to host you on this State of Vegetation Management session. This is episode 5 of our series. With us today, we have Clayton Jones. He's the Vegetation Management Supervisor. He's with Jones Onslow Electric Co-op. And this morning, Clayton will share with us some of his experiences, and we'll have a little Q&A here. I did want to cover a couple of housekeeping rules for some of you that may have questions. If you don't mind, just go ahead and post those in the chat. There's a pretty good chance we'll cover some of the questions that you may have, but to the extent that we haven't had a chance to do that, I will reserve some time at the end to make sure we go over those questions and try to make sure that we have that answered for you. So with that, let me just a little background about myself. Again, I'm Gary Huntley. I actually retired from Entergy Corporation in 2021. I had over 30 years of experience in energy, and most of that with electric utility and gas. I'm sorry, gas and electric utilities. In that time period, I did have vegetation management as one of my areas of responsibilities. And so, with that, Clayton, if you don't mind, would you give us a little bit about yourself and maybe a little bit about your company?
Yeah, sure. So my name is Clayton Jones. I work with Jones Onslow Electric Membership Corporation. We're located in Jacksonville and around Sneads Ferry, North Carolina. So we're primarily on the coast. I've been with the company for 16 years. I started as a tree trimmer with Jones Onslow. I was fortunate enough to get promoted just a few years later as a crew foreman. I stayed in that position for around 12 years. And until December of last year, I was promoted to supervisor of vegetation management. Primarily Jones Onslow, like I said, we're on the coast. We're mainly flatlands. We have service territory that spans from the beaches, mainly across farm, flatlands, and we get out into some pretty remote areas of the country. I'd say from one end of our system to the other, we're about an hour and a half drive to cover the system in itself. We serve roughly 86,000 members, and we are trying to mitigate and maintain the vegetation around 1,800 to 2,000 miles of overhead distribution line.
Wow, that's pretty awesome. So, Clayton, I believe you might be the first of our hosts in this series who's actually worked as a trimmer, right? So, I think you've probably got that range of experience more than probably any of the other participants that we've had. But I really look forward to this discussion. Tell me a
Yes,
little
sir.
bit about some of the challenges that you have, and what does vegetation management look like at Johns Onslow over the years?
So I can tell you, like you said, being in this department for the entirety of my career, the last 16 years, I have seen a lot of changes. When I first started, primarily most of the responsibilities were split, I would say 50-50. We had some in-house crews responsible for some routine trimming, some work orders and such. And then we also had some contract crews. They were specifically we're working on our system to try to do more of a routine type cycle trim. As the years progressed, I saw some of that responsibilities that was primarily in-house start to shift. We started to contract out some of our responsibilities, primarily our herbicide application. We scaled back our in-house crews. We took away that crew and essentially put on more contractors. So we've definitely seen lots of changes since I've been with the company. Currently, we still do have 2 in-house crews, but we really scaled up our contractors. Primarily, I think the reason behind that is with the technology that's out there and with what Jones also is currently involved in and invested in with satellite imagery, it's opened our eyes to help us understand the vegetation on our system as a whole and to help us understand the resources that we need to try to secure to mitigate and manage that vegetation efficiently.
That's pretty good. I think that's pretty dynamic that you have the internal resources as well as the externals. The way you're describing this whole pivot to using technology and perhaps leveraging more contract crews, it gives me the sense that you're trying to be more dynamic in terms of the way that you respond. And maybe your internal crews may not have all of the equipment, or you may not have all the resources that you need. Can you tell me a little bit about the processes that you have to manage vegetation?
So currently, the processes that are in place. Our in-house crews, we have one bucket truck, current consists of 5 individuals. Their primary responsibilities are any new construction orders that come in. That's what they're going to, their main focus is going to be. And I can tell you, with us being on the coast around the military base that's right here in Jacksonville, we're experiencing growth rates that I don't foresee it slowing down anytime soon. We're putting in new services at staggering rates annually. Again, it just only seems to be gaining traction and it doesn't seem to be slowing down at any time. Those guys, they mitigate or take care of those orders. And then if there is an opportunity for those guys to focus on something else, we'll use them specifically for outage follow-up. We'll use them to try to mitigate some of those outage areas. If we've experienced an outage and there's an opportunity for us to have a conversation with the member, we'll use that crew to try to take care of that as well. The contractors that we use, they're primarily on a cycle trim currently. Previous to me being in this position, they were more so on, I would say, just routine trimming. They were essentially trim as far as they can get and today and pick up tomorrow where they left off. I think we're beginning to realize that is an outdated approach to trying to properly and efficiently manage vegetation on our system. So we have shifted over to the use of satellite imagery. That technology has definitely, I know for me personally, it's gave me confidence knowing that I can essentially look at our entire system right here in my office. There is some follow-up on it that needs to be done to ensure the accuracy of it, but I can use that technology to essentially guide our crews, our contract crews, to mitigate the vegetation of our system efficiently and make sure they're working on in the right areas at the right time. We do currently have a sky trim in-house. It's just one of the things we've always done. It's always been here. It's working for us. That crew is on a fairly reasonable routine cycle that again, there's no issues with that at the current time. So as far as I'm concerned, we intend on keeping that as the in-house plug for us. But yeah, we definitely use the in-house crews and the contractors to put the right crews in the right place and just ensure that we are tackling the vegetation on our system efficiently as we seem to think possible.
Good deal. And so your internal crews, are they the ones that you're using to manage your, I'm assuming you're using them for your inspections and for your sort of your work planning, right? Like they're your internal. Can you tell me a little bit more about how you use those for those processes?
So to be quite honest with you, those crews specifically are to handle the work that comes in as far as, like I was saying, new construction, any hazard follow-ups. As far as the inspection process goes, a lot of that responsibility falls on me. So I am currently not only sitting in the office from day to day, looking at plans, shifting orders around. I'm also in the truck. I'm meeting with the members, engaging in conversations about trees that they may have concerns with, possibly to see, would they like for us to take the tree down? Would they like for us to trim it? What is the best option that fits that specific circumstance? And I'm also responsible for going behind the contractors and ensuring that they are meeting the standards that we have set. And also they're able to mitigate the vegetation in an efficient manner so we can try to keep up with what the satellite imagery is projecting for us for that year's works plan. So again, a lot of that responsibility from the inspection and everything, it does fall back on my plate.
Clayton, as I hear you describe that, it reminds me of some things I've experienced in my career, and you just can't be everywhere at the same time, right? And so you're trying to handle inspections, you're responsible for planning, you're meeting with the members, and you describe post-work audits. You're like an octopus. You've got all these hands, and you're just trying to keep a hold of everything. It dawned on me as you were describing that one of the challenges is, as much as you can plan out your schedule for a day, a member is going to call or have an issue, and then you've got to shift priorities, right? To do that, you have a crew that's completed work, and maybe you have planned to, you may have gotten some information from your boss about changes in the budget, and then you had to redevelop plans. And at the same time, you're responsible for inspections of the crew. I got to believe that the ability to collect information through other technology has got to be a godsend for you, right? It is the ability to collect information quickly. Can you tell me, give me in your words, how that's helped maybe make your life a little bit easier?
So I can tell you in previous conversations with other co-ops, I have had the opportunity to meet with other co-ops in our area. Yesterday, and we were thankful enough to be able to meet with a co-op that's within an hour from us and discuss some processes. And I honestly, it gives me great pleasure to tell these other co-ops that the least of my concern at this current time is knowing what work needs to be done. I have a lot of confidence in what satellite imagery is able to offer to us. Again, like I said, I still do feel the need to go out and audit what it is projecting. But up to this point, it has been within a certain percentage of accuracy to where I feel confident that if I do get tied up in something unforeseen and the crews finish a circuit that they're working on, at the click of a button on here in my office, I can decide what circuit they can go to next. And it just does take a lot of that stress or worry off of me. I don't have to wonder, are the crews in the right place anymore? And that was something that I think in previous years was always a conversation like, why are the crews where they're at now? Or why are they here versus here? And it was never really something that we had a good answer for other than this is where we're getting the most calls, or this is where the most members are experiencing outages, or whatever the case may be. We're just doing the best that we could. So it definitely has given us some confidence in that aspect.
Very good. I'm looking in the chat room here, Clayton, and one of the questions we had was, will satellite imagery accurately scan through areas overhang canopy? And I can just share my experience. So back in 2019, 2018, really, when I first started looking into this, that part of it was not there, or at least not to the point where it is now. I think what we've seen is the adoption and the improvement in that technology, literally year over year. Now with the SAR scanning, that those satellites, they actually can see from over the overhang. They can predict the growing rate and take that overhang into consideration. It also can penetrate clouds better than it did before. And based on what I've read, it looks like in the next 12 to 18 months, there are going to be approximately 1,000 new satellites that are going to be put in orbit, and they're going to have the technology to actually be able to see things more accurately, right? So you'll be able to get more precise information. So I'm just amazed at how far that technology has come since I started looking at it in 2018. I didn't know if you had any experiences or if you looked at it in that level, anything to share on that.
I don't have a lot to share with the overhang per se. I haven't seen any issues with overhangs for us currently. We've always had the process to trim from ground to sky, and with the trees and vegetation that's in the area that we serve, for the most part, we're able to get most all that overhang. There is some areas where overhang does still occur, but the satellite imagery seems to still project it at a high level, and it seems to be pretty accurate from what I'm seeing at this time.
Good deal. Thank you, Clayton. And another question we had was, how recent is the satellite data? So basically, the question is asking from the time that you had the scanning to the time that you had it processed. What did that look like for you?
So the data, some of the data that we're currently working off of, the images were submitted to us at the end of last year. So it is some data from, I would say, the last year per se. But for the most part, the data that we're currently working on is stuff that was submitted to us at the beginning of this year. I'm sure that it's something that can be tailored specifically to the individual that's looking to move to that type of technology. It's not this is a certain day you'll receive your data and it's from image that was taken years ago. By no means. It's images are taken, everything is gathered and overlaid and then submitted to the company to obviously review and also start utilizing within a pretty fairly reasonable time frame.
Yeah, that's pretty good. I think in my instance, I had a pretty large system, and we found that it was good to catch things at different peaks of the season, if you will. We catch it
Yes.
right before the growing season, and we'd catch it in the fall. And then you got a chance to see what the system looked like before the actual growing starts, and then you could see afterwards, and then you could calculate better the growth rates and all this. So that the system was pretty good about that. We also had a question about the off-cycle trimming and how that might affect your costs with your contractors, including mobilization, et cetera. I think this question, a larger question really around, you were talking about using using contractors versus in-house. And I think you mentioned that you had contractors on cycle trim. Did I get that right? Do I remember that correct?
Yes, I would like to add to answer that question, if I may. I failed to mention we do have contractors currently on a T&M rate, and those crews are also helping to mitigate some of the orders that are coming in from consumers. And anytime an outage occurs, that gives me the opportunity to engage conversation with the member, especially while it's fresh on their mind. Outages occurred. This tree, we're thinking this has part to do with the issue at hand. And I tell you, it's got us a lot of buy-in from the consumer with that follow-up to get them to allow us to remove a lot of the vegetation and trees that are causing those issues. And once that conversation's had, that takes priority for us. So we get those contract crews that are on that T&M rate, and that's where we start to steer them. So they're flexible with us, and that would be highest priority.
Very good. And can you just briefly talk about how you manage or process the data that you get from this technology, and how do you use that to make sure that the workflow is complete and tracked?
So the data that we get from the satellite image technology, we look at it at a circuit level. So we'll basically assess what circuits need to be trimmed in the next year or so. We'll gather the amount of line miles to gauge the size of the workload. And that'll help us give us an idea on what we're looking at as far as the cycle trim for the next year. And that we have the ability to take that data and even break it down to more of a segmented level. If we look at a circuit that's flagging that needs to be trimmed, but we assess it maybe on a smaller segment level, and we realize that it's just a few areas that are of high growing risk or high total risk, and they're causing, could potentially be what's flagging that as the circuit needs to be trimmed. That may be something that we shift over to our T&M rate crews for them to mitigate. Essentially, we just take the data that we are provided and we just see how can we use it to best fit the crews and resources that we have. Hopefully that answers the question.
Yeah, I thought that was pretty good. And one thing I thought about there is, so really with this information, it really informs your contracting strategy, right? So you had a contracting strategy in place, and now that you have more information, you may shift towards being either more nimble, faster reacting, which might mean you get more or other crews on T&E. Or if you have information that's pretty solid, you might be able to put out a bid package that's very specific. You talked about having these spans and really knowing exactly surgically where to go to manage vegetation. And I've always found that the more detailed information you have when you put together a bid package, the better the prices you have, right? Because you're really taking some of the risk off of the table for the contractor. They have more, yeah, they have more assurance around what it is that needs to be done. They can better plan, and it feels you're going to get a better price and maybe even a better outcome in terms of timing and quality of work. We had a question about whether or not this method would work for a larger system. And if you don't mind, I'll just share. When I was with Entergy, we had a little over 90,000 line miles across 4 states. And so when I used the satellite technology, we did use it across the entire system. And yes, it does work for a larger system. In fact, it works great. Clayton, when I hear you're the one man show and you've got all these things going on, the more members you have joining your system, as you described, as your system continues to grow, the bigger the challenges around that. And what I found with the larger system is that it allowed me to get, even though as the next question asked me, is it real-time imagery? It's not real time, but it's much faster than any and all of the manual inspections we've ever done on the system. I literally can get a snapshot of all 90 plus thousand line miles of the distribution system in a reading. And then in a matter of weeks, I had it all mapped out. I could never put my eyes on that much, the system in that short period of time. So hopefully that answers the question there. I'm going to move us just a little bit along, and I see there's some questions here, and I think we're gonna probably tap a couple of these when we get there. There's one about budgets that I definitely want to come to here pretty soon. But Clayton, can you tell us? So, what's really on your radar, like for this year or maybe for the next few years? Now that you've used this technology, you've had an opportunity to incorporate that into your work processes. What do you see now as being more important things from a vegetation management perspective for your company?
So currently, one of the main things I would think is on my radar, it's something I think about every day, is I really just want to make sure that now that Jones Onslow is able to gather data to help us better understand the vegetation that's needing to be trimmed on our system, we have a better understanding, I would say, more so than we've ever had. And once you are able to have that data, it's important that you take it and see, our practice is the best fit for mitigating what it is showing. And I think it's started to open our eyes a little bit. And maybe we need to focus on, like you're talking about, a bid package, or focus on getting prices for what we are up against for that year. I will tell you currently, and as long as I've been with the company, we have been working off of a unit-based pricing. And essentially, it's made it great for budget purposes. We know roughly what we're going to spend annually. The budget seems to be not a major concern for us in terms of going over. But what we have been unable to really have a good understanding of is how much or how many miles of lines or how much vegetation are we going to be able to tackle this year with that budget. We never really did a good stem count or go ahead of the crews to audit the amount of vegetation related to a specific circuit. We went behind the crews to count to make sure that those units were being met, which of course they were. But with this new technology, if I know that next year we have just say 200 miles line and needs to be maintained, if we can get a bid on a cost per mile per se, we can gauge up based on our budget how many miles of line we should be able to get maintained. And if it meets the demand, that's great. If it doesn't, then now we have some more information that the higher ups, the vice president, of course, can take to the CEO and the board members, and they can have a discussion based on facts, based on data and real numbers that is specific to our system. So I think it's definitely something that'll hopefully help us. And that's one of our main focuses right now, I feel like, just making sure that we have the best contracting strategies and that we have the most efficient practices in place for budgeting, of course.
So Clayton, when you're talking about the contracting strategies, one of the things that was brought up here in the chat is about cycle for side trimming, right? Are you on a cycle for that, or are you just entirely trimming where? Can you respond to a little bit to that in terms of what you guys are doing?
So currently, Jones Onslow has taken a pretty aggressive approach. We've shifted from just the routine trimming to a data-driven approach, using the technology to steer the contract crews. And all along the same time, we started to realize that we're having and experiencing more outages in areas. So we took a more aggressive approach to not only side trim and top out the shade trees, but also try to get permission to remove a lot of that vegetation. And 6, 7 months in, we're liking the results, but we're also realizing that it has slowed us down tremendously. And if we continue on that real aggressive approach, we may not be able to mitigate the vegetation of our system in an efficient cycle trim, or even be able to meet the demands of what a satellite imaging technology has to offer for us. So it's definitely something that we're looking at as well.
Good deal. And as you think through all of that, where in your processes do you identify or address the health status of vegetation? How is that being addressed? Falling dead trees outside of the right of way, even, how does that factor into what you do today?
So currently we don't have a good process as far as fallen trees and hazard trees or dead trees. We do have a lot of that is mitigated through our sky trim as he trims around the system. He takes care of any of those trees that he might be exposed to or come up to. But is that the most efficient? Probably not. It's something that we need to look into. And I think right now our main focus is not the hazard trees as far as the fall ends. Our main focus right now is the growing trees, specifically for Jones Onslow. And when it comes to those other aspects of maintaining vegetation, we'll have to look into that once we try to smooth out some of the processes that we see or feel are more important at this current time.
Good deal. And I think your experience is very consistent from what we've heard from other utilities really around the country. I think I always thought about cycle trim plans as being heavily insured, right? You can't put your eyes on everything, but you contract out on the cycle to give you confidence to help you sleep at night that you've got your system is pretty well covered. And I think that comes at a price, right? I think we're pretty much overinsured. We've got contractors that trim parts of the system that don't really need attention, but it's part of that plan. And then there'll be parts that for other reasons, because of the weather is heavier rain or soil conditions, or it could be just a species of the tree that's happened to grow in. Customers, your members are planting trees near the power lines, all those things. And then it'll cause you to have to adjust that sort of cycle trim. But I think what happens is that outside of right of way, it's certainly in my experience, we found that we did a great job inside of the right of way. And then we started seeing these unpredictable outside of right of way, right? Once we started collecting the satellite imagery, I actually was able to find these trees that were just outside of our right of way, and I found them in clusters. And so it allowed me to get the actual location of the trees and see the proximity to the system. And I was able to divert some of the cycle trim money and use that to remove these outside of right of way danger trees. I actually put them in these geo clusters. That's what I call them. But it's basically you clump them together, you write a contract together, or you send out a crew on T&E, but you give them these very specific maps so they know exactly which trees you want to remove. And they go right out to them and do that. And I'll tell you, we found that to be a very good thing for us to do in terms of improving reliability. So we continue to obviously pay attention to the inside of right of way, but then I was systematically removing these trees that were at risk to cause outages. Can you tell us a little bit about what your reliability targets are, or how you manage that, and maybe how the technology helped you along those lines?
So I do know as far as reliability goes, in the past, I don't know that we really were doing the best job that we could have is in terms of any outages or any type of tree related fall ends, grow ins, anything that was causing the interruptions to us. We weren't as a company doing the best with documenting that. And we started to realize that, hey, we're wanting to up our budget for vegetation, but when it comes to the numbers, our customer interruptions that are vegetation related, they just don't add up. So once we focused on that approach with our line crews and such, once they started documenting what they were actually seeing in the field and properly coding what they were up against, it shifted our outages that were vegetation related from around 5%, which in anybody's eyes would be understandable. And it shifted that number up, and within about a year and a half, it went up to right around 30%. And we all agreed that 30% outages that are caused by vegetation was just not acceptable. So through that conversation, we have been able to increase the budget a little bit. And in turn, by doing that, we're hoping that we can get those numbers down. So we'll be looking at those numbers specifically in terms of reliability. What are our outages? What percentage of our outages that occur are vegetation related? And then for me specifically, I would like to be able to mitigate all of the vegetation that is projected with the satellite imagery. If it has it projected for a specific year, within reason, I would like to be able to see that we have the resources on our system to make sure we're trimming those circuits within that calendar year. And if not, if we're not able to trim the circuits in the entirety, it goes back to what I said earlier. We'll try to shift our focus to maybe just mitigate some of the high growing areas in those last few specific circuits. So we can hopefully just mitigate that vegetation in the calendar year that is projected. And as far in terms of reliability, I think that in itself should help us meet those goals.
Thank you, Clayton. That's pretty insightful. And as you were mentioning the budget at Dawn, there are a lot of folks who are wondering, okay, this is new technology. How expensive is it? Can you just talk about relative to your budget? Is it a very big part, a small part? Can you, without necessarily having to give maybe all your numbers, but can you just talk a little bit about the relative cost of what you're using versus that?
When I look at the budget, that's all new to me. I was not in any type of management role prior to this position. Even the previous supervisor, he was not really involved with the budget per se. But when I look at the budget in its entirety and I look at what it's costing us for satellite imagery, to me, it's a no-brainer. It's definitely not our highest line item. I would say it fits in there pretty comparable to some. It's really hard to give an educated comparison, but without giving specific numbers. But as far as in terms of the cost of it, the cost essentially is going to pay for itself. If we can lower our customer interruptions, we don't have to send a crew out there in the middle of the night. That we're saving money in that aspect. It's going to pay dividends, and the return should pay for itself. And that's what we're hoping to see in the next year or so. We're hoping to see those outages decrease, and then we can start crunching numbers to see, hey, this is what it's costing us on the backside. This is what it's potentially saved us based on historical data. And if it can wash itself out, it is essentially a no-brainer to me. You invest in something, that's investment in the company, and it's paying for itself.
Yeah, that's spot on. In my experience, the benefits were we saved money on contracting, right? Because I was able to, with that information, I was able to be more surgical on what needed to be trimmed and when. And so I actually saved costs on not sending contractors out to say trim half of a circuit that didn't need to be done.
Right.
It could be deferred. And so I was able to save that money. And I actually took some of that money to address those hazard trees. So I was able to, that in the exact same budget that I had, I was able to get information faster, develop work plans, adjust for storms, and address hazard trees. And we got the return on the investment within the first budget year. Literally within 12 months, we started seeing those improvements. And I think what you described is your contracting strategy and how you make shifts on that. I would even submit you're probably going to be not just within your budget, but you probably have extra dollars that you may just decide to deploy somewhere else, right? To help you reliability on your system.
Yes.
Yep. Good deal. So Clayton, what's your top 3 or 3 to 5 areas of concern? Was now that you've got this bucket of vegetation you're managing all of this, you're the supervisor. What do you see as some of your top areas of concern?
I try to look at the entire vegetation management department in a whole. Some of my main concerns, of course, are the discussions and the possibility of shifting the way the contractors are currently billing and the way that we're pushing out the budget or the bid process. With that shift, we're trying to look at what is the best options, what's the best practices, how can we do this in a manner that will not just totally disrupt the way that we do business. That's definitely a concern for me. Another concern is we seem to be, and everybody that's in this type of work understands, we seem to be struggling to retain employees. We're having a bit of a challenge finding employees that want to come in to do this type of work. I will say a benefit for Jones Onzo is our vegetation management department is a doorway into the company. So with the end goal for them to have the possibility to move over into the line program, it does entice them to come on board with us. A concern for me is a lot of discussions now with contractors and what they're willing to pay, maybe in comparison to what the co-ops may be paying. This creating a bit of a challenge for us as well. So that is a concern. Are we going to be able to continue to get valuable and quality employees to apply for this type of work when they have the opportunity to go work for contractors and make substantially more money. I don't think when you're not comparing apples to apples per se, because I know what the company has to offer in terms of benefits. And I don't think that is something that's considered by these individuals when they're just looking at a dollar amount per se. Another challenge, I would say for Jones Onslow, it's really hard. Also, just for me and myself, a challenge like we've discussed is just a simple fact that I am responsible for so many different aspects of this department. As I continue to grow in my position, I hope that we can potentially see an opportunity to bring in more resources to try to balance this workload a little bit so we can ensure that each aspect of what I'm currently responsible for is being handled as efficient and also as with the respect that it deserves. Because I do feel that there's times that I give more attention to certain areas and maybe not something else that I probably should have. So I do feel torn at times, and that is a challenge for me.
Yeah, that's totally understood. And I think embedded in the your comments about what contractors are willing to pay, there's inflation is everywhere. We hear about it all day. So as you're setting your budgets are set based upon what you believe to be the cost. And then as we see, we read about every day, those costs just continue to increase. And I think that shortage of workers that you're experiencing, that's everywhere, right? It's not even just,
Yes.
it's all over our economy. And I think that is a big challenge. It's almost like as soon as you predict what that increase might be, it's on top of that, right? By the time you have it in your budget, 6 months later, what you're experiencing is that number is actually higher than that. So Clayton, you were talking about obviously all these things that you have on your plate and really trying to get all this done. And here you are bringing in new technology. Tell us a little bit about what's the change management challenge has been for you, right? You got all this going on and you're trying to introduce something totally new into all of your processes. Give me how do you deal with that? What's the good, bad, and ugly in that for you?
So as far as the change process, I was not in the position I'm currently in, but I was actively involved with the transition from our previous cycle trim to the implementation of satellite imagery. That process to shift the focus from our contractors to trim on that routine cycle towards a different method. We really took that technology and that information and used it to create a plan that closely mimicked what the contractors were already doing previously. But we essentially just put them more on a specific circuit to obviously mitigate the vegetation that was specific to what we needed them to be working on. As far as change, where was the question at? As far as change management, so the biggest barriers or pushbacks when it comes to new technology is just wanting to give it the focus or the attention that it deserves for that technology. And then, like you said, being pulled in so many different directions and trying to change the processes, it's just been a challenge, but we're just doing the best that we can with it, honestly. And I'm not sure that I answered that the best, but it's just we're going with the flow and we're trying to improve our processes as we go.
Yeah, no, I think that's the acknowledgement, right? That it's not going to be easy. Change is we know even in our personal lives, that's a stressor, right? For most people,
Yes.
it's something that's a little bit different. I've always found that, you mentioned having a plan, and I think that's the most important part. You've got to, that something new and different is coming. Sounds like you're trying to incorporate a plan to address that. And I also found in my experience that incentives were very helpful. So I've had other opportunities to bring in technology across vegetation as well as other groups that I've managed, and always giving employees time to adopt to new technology and work processes. Obviously, you're under the gun, but you still have to carve out some time and be a little forgiving. Mistakes are going to be made, and the key is to just keep encouraging people, right, to move forward because you're going to get the payback is great the faster that they come up to speed. And so we actually had a little fun, made a little contest out of it. It had some financial incentives, just nothing really big, but just to get people on board. And then I found that people, they're on a different journey, personal journey around technology, right? Some people have the brand new latest phones and some have that phone they've been having for 5, 6 years and they don't want to get rid of it because then they have to learn the new phone. And so,
Right.
you just get that wide range, particularly when you have people who've been in the industry for a very long time and have done things the same way for a very long time. You can be, it can be met with different anxieties, if you will, about moving forward. I think what that says is that your folks really want to do a good job. I don't think people in general just want to be a barrier to change. It's just that they're concerned about whether or not will this stuff, with this real new technology, will it really work? Are we gonna be worse off? Is my reliability gonna go south on me, so to speak? And so I think it's worth just paying attention to those concerns and finding a way to manage through the people's expectations around that. And the last thing I'll say on that is that I found that is when you bring people in. So when you test the technology, you do your pilots or you come in, you field verify. That's the information you have to share with everyone, right? To make sure that they know, hey, look, we got this information and it's pretty darn accurate. It's 94% accurate or whatever. And it's better than us putting human eyes on this thing. And we got it a lot faster. We're able to respond faster. I think you have to make time to share those validations so that people get comfortable. They can sleep at night because they believe the information that you collected is valuable and that it's accurate. And I think that's part of that change management is just incorporating that into the work plans as you described your plan for, plan for doing that. Yep. One of the things that we're getting close to wrapping up here, I did want to ask you about a couple of things, but I'll just throw it out as a general question. I know if you've been in this industry from the ground up and you've got new technology. So in your own opinion, what do you see maybe as the opportunities for change? Where do you think the industry might be headed? What do you think from Jones Onslow based on this technology? What's your kind of wish list or what do you think this might be bringing?
Honestly, I never thought many years ago when I started with the company, I would be able to work my way up into the position I'm currently at. I can only hope that with this technology, it can continue to gain traction, gain momentum, gain buy-in from more co-ops and more utility companies. And we can utilize this technology in different areas and different aspects, different work types. We can have these conversations. This webinar today, it's not something that I was completely happy about doing. I was glad to have been asked to do it, but this is not something that I'm very used to doing or confident in. But I hoped by sharing some of my previous experiences and what I'm experiencing now, that maybe there's somebody out there that's watching today that'll say, "Hey, if he did it, I can do it." I hope they think they can do a better job. I would love for them to come on. Hopefully, they can join the technology push that I think is starting to make some gain momentum and share their insight. And by doing that, we can start to learn, hey, this is working for this company over here where I was reluctant to try to use it for that benefit. Um, so I just hope that as the years go on, we can continue to use technology to better serve the work that we're doing, help us to better plan, help us to secure resources based on what the projections are. Hopefully we can get over some of those barriers when it comes to budgeting purposes, and we can use this data to really help us. So it's not anymore feeling like this isn't just my opinion. We're investing in this company, in this technology, and they're offering us this. It puts the ball in someone else's court per se, if they're responsible for making those decisions. I hope that as we continue to gain momentum, it seems like the vegetation management field in itself, just in the last few years, has really, in my opinion, seemed to gain more notoriety. It just seems like I hear more and more about it. There's more opportunities out there. There's opportunities for advancement. There's different companies. There's so many more opportunities. I hope that it starts to continue to gain traction and people will start to be interested in this type of work. I know for us working specifically for electric cooperative, most people are mainly focused on doing line work. And, there's nothing wrong with that. But I also know that the department that I'm in, it is a very important part of maintaining safe and reliable electric service for our members. And I take pride in the work that we do. I know the guys that work on our system, whether they're in-house or contractors, they take pride in it. And we just want to continue to do the best job that we can for the co-op and just to get the recognition that I feel like everybody that's in this type of field deserves.
I think that's well said. And I think that's pretty insightful about how that might change. I think early on you talked about your company and your department specifically is the inroads, right, to people coming in your company and wanting to be linemen. I think it's going to be pretty interesting that over the next few years, you may have people who are coming into your company who are very tech savvy who say, hey, I really want to work with you on taking that data, processing that data, and helping you to manage using those new tools. So I know a lot of what we talked about today was the technology for collecting the data, but really inherent in this discussion was the technology of processing that data, right? Of taking that information and developing work plans and turning those things around quickly. And I think just really being able to make changes based upon if your budget change, can reprioritize and then develop new work plans faster. But you probably, I know for me, it was sitting in, we had many meetings and Excel spreadsheets and Zoom meetings and face-to-face meetings, and that just took a lot of time. And now if we get, whenever we get the information that the budget has changed, the more money or less, usually less, then after that we were able to fast turn around what it is that we plan to do. So I think the technology about processing data and developing work plans that you can hand out to contractors. I like the direction that's moving. And I know I mentioned earlier about the satellite technology and how it keeps advancing. And I just keep reading up on that. And I'm just very impressed at what the later model satellites are going to be able to see, do, process, and the accuracy of that. And I'm really excited about our ability to collect that data faster and process it faster. We just keep seeing those changes in technology, and it's a great time. I'll just share with you guys. I actually had the opportunity to develop a mobile app where we were able to see, get the information, to process the information faster, like in the field, like at your fingertips. You didn't have to wait till you get back to your computer. It's like all those things I think are the world of possibilities. And I think there's a lot of things that we haven't talked about that's going to be coming up. So I think that new technology is where it is. It's that collection of data, that processing of data. And I think you're going to see more people coming into the industry. Like you mentioned, it's going to put vegetation management on the map. We won't be just taking for granted, I don't think, anymore. Clayton, you've been awesome. I think it's, as I've done these, this is the fifth of the series, and I truly enjoy hearing from people from different parts of the country that have different terrain and have different priorities around their membership, or if it's an investor-owned utility, things from storms to wildfires to, you mentioned a little bit earlier about having beaches. So you got to trim around that, but you're trying to get out of the way of the local economy there. You don't want to get in the way of tourists. And I think you're the first one that I can recall that has really started from the ground up. And it's just really been great to hear your perspective on vegetation management. And I really appreciate you sharing your journey with us today. Any parting word or that you want to give us before we sign off?
No, I do appreciate the opportunity, like I said earlier, and I do hope that this gives other people maybe an opportunity to learn something. They're by at any chance they have or want to reach out to me, they're welcome to. I hope that if there's somebody that out there that maybe is thinking about doing something similar to this, whether it be utilizing the technology or just volunteering to do these webinars, I would encourage them to make that leap of faith and just share what you can. And let's continue to use our knowledge that we have and just continue to gain traction with what we're doing in the vegetation management field. Again, I
That's
just
awesome.
appreciate it.
Yeah, that is awesome, man. Clayton, I can't thank you enough. I think you obviously you shared your time with us today, and so that's important. We already know you've got a million things going on, man. So
Okay.
the fact that you carved out this hour is powerful, and I think everyone there could get that. We've got some things your folks are posting. Thank you, and want to ask about your email address. I think what we'll do is platform AI Dash on their website actually record these sessions. And we have all of the state of vegetation management series can be found on at AI vegetation.com. And I think that's where they can get that. So I know some of them are looking for your email address. You want to share that, I'll let you just say it verbally here, but it'll be on they'll be able to find that information when they go to the iDash website.
Yeah, they can look on the website, or they can just reach out to Jones Onslow. A member will take the call, and they'll just forward them over to me, and we'll have that conversation. That'll probably be the easiest. And again, I appreciate the opportunity.
Very good. Thank you, sir. I hope you have the great rest of your day, and good luck to you on all that you're doing and continue vegetation management.
All right, I appreciate it. Thank you.
All right. Take care. Bye.
You too.